great interest to us. And it is about gender and media scholarship and education in Africa. I think for most of us who are here, we are either interested parties or we have been engaged in gender and media scholarship in one way or another. So you're most welcome. And I think that this is going to be one of those practical things that we talk about because we have been engaged in the area and the people attending have also been engaged in one way or another. It's of interest to all of us. We shall have a number of speakers and each person will have 4 to 5 minutes to speak to us. And after each of them has spoken, then we will be able to go to breakout rooms. I wanted to take this opportunity to introduce the members who are already here, the persons going to speak to us who are already here. And I will start with Dr. Joyce Bazira. Dr. Joyce is a communication specialist and 20 years of experience in Tanzania, in communication and based in Tanzania. She will be speaking to us about the missing links in terms of gender and technology. What do these new technologies and their growth actually afford us in terms of gender scholarship? I think we will be interested in hearing that. And then I have Ms. Ivy Fofie from the University of Oregon, and she will be speaking to us about gender. Forgive me. She will be speaking to us about women using traditional media like radio, and she will also speak to women in film using local language. I think that is another interesting, very, very interesting conversation we are going to have there. I have Dr. Abena Animwaa Yeboah-Banin. I hope that I have pronounced that well.
You've actually done very well.
Yes, whenever I'm in Ghana, people think I'm Ghanaian, so that must be some blood, something in my blood. So she'll be looking at what the discussion beyond the numbers. How can we ensure that female practitioners' consciousness of the inequality in media content and so on actually becomes part of agency that is needed to deal with some of the problems we talk all the time. And I should be having Dr. Winston Mano. I'm not sure he's already checked in. Yes, Dr. Mano is in here from the University of Westminster, and he will be talking to us about a more responsive African standpoint for African women. And I think I am very, very interested in hearing that. And it's one of the ways that we will be dealing with the problems we are talking about. I have Professor Monica Chibita, who is a professor of communication, and she is actually the Dean Faculty of Journalism, Media and Communication. She has been my boss for a very long time. So she will be speaking to issues of media and scholarship in Africa, the gaps in research and the gaps in curricula. So I'm sure that too will be interesting. I know that she has been trying to join in, and she should be here anytime. And lastly, I do have Professor Margaret Jjuuko. Professor Margaret Jjuuko is from the University of Rwanda, a School of Journalism and Communication. She will be speaking to research gaps in the implementation of gender media policies. Now, Professor Jjuuko has had a small accident. She is seeing a doctor, but she will be joining us very shortly. So I'm happy to have you all. And in the last few days, as we have been going through different sessions, I have managed to attend a few, and it just struck me that there are so many women out there. I was looking at the profiles of these women and I thought, where are these women all the time? Because every time we engage with media content, it appears that the world is just, it does not include women. There are few women in media content, and yet there are many, many women with amazing profiles. I have looked at some of the profiles of the speakers in this conference and I have been truly, truly amazed. So it seems to me that as academics, we are also like politicians. We are very busy all the time. We are talking and speaking and going places, engaging all the time, but people rarely see what we are doing. So this conversation is a welcome one, and we should be able to engage with some of the issues that few people see the point of engaging in, and maybe many people are also concerned about. I will start this conversation by inviting Dr. Abena to give her opening remarks or her flashpoint conversation. Welcome, Dr. Abena.
Yes, thank you very much for the opportunity, and good afternoon to all gathered here. I just can see a very rich conversation about to happen, and I feel so bad that I'm going to miss out on it. But for the 4 or so minutes that I have, allow me to draw your attention to some aspect of gender and media scholarship in Africa that I want to propose that we scholars who are interested in gender and media may need to start turning our attention to. So I'm looking and inviting all of us to begin to look beyond the numbers. Why am I inviting us to look beyond the numbers? And in fact, what do I mean when I say we need to look beyond the numbers? So by now, everybody in this room who is interested in gender and media and has had opportunity to familiarize themselves with scholarship on the continent would arrive at a certain point of agreement. One, we know that the media industries in Africa are very gendered. There's no question in our minds about that. And there's enough empirical evidence pointing to that direction. I'm sure if I went around and asked each of us to cite research in our respective countries on media and gender, our conclusion will be that the evidence shows there is gendering in the media. In other words, men, women are treated differently as employees in the media, as consumers of media, and also in content. There's also another point of convergence in the evidence and in discussions. It is the fact that this gendering evidences as inequalities that women have to suffer. In other words, the gendering presents disadvantages to women. So women suffer unequal treatment in recruitment practices, in leadership. There's tons of evidence showing that women are not even at the decision-making tables in media organizations, issues of accessing opportunities, issues of representation in content, how the media represents women, etc., etc. My point is, we know that by now there's enough evidence across the GMMP, Global Media Monitoring Project, studies by Bailey, studies by Andy et al., study by myself and members of faculty in my department, Prof. Gadzekpo, etc., and even Ivy Fofie, who is here with us. We know that the media industries are gendered and that women suffer inequality. And not surprisingly, therefore, there's been a lot of interventionist efforts directed at increasing women's presence in the media. So fueled by the feminist media theory logic that if you have women entering media, there'll be a critical enough mass that will begin to cause the changes that balance out the inequality. So with this in mind, there's been quite a lot of interventionist efforts by CSOs, etc., to try and open up the media industry to more women, get more women to take up roles in media, get more women to enter, if you like, relatively masculine areas, etc., etc. So there's been a lot of efforts there. However, if you went counting again today, you will still see the same story. The industry is gendered. The industry is not particularly fair to women. So it would appear to me that there is some missing link somewhere. In other words, I argue that just having women enter the industry is not enough. For me, and as I've discovered in research that we're doing, it takes conscious women entering the industry for the actual changes we need to happen. So I'm inviting media and gender scholars to begin to look at how women in media problematize the issues of inequality that we've seen in evidence. So if they don't if they are not aware, conscious of the inequalities assume a status of norm. And therefore, it's just how things are, and they have to live it every day. If they don't internalize these inequalities, they don't problematize them, then the quest, the drive to seek answers and solutions to them would be missing on them. Therefore, my argument is that the research lens needs to look beyond counting the instances of inequality, the instances, the consciousness levels that women in media have about the inequalities they face, and more importantly, their readiness and their agency things. So organizations such as AWIM, which has put us here together, Alliance for Women in Media Africa, in Ghana, Women in Broadcasting, etc., etc. The women in these groupings, how may we theorize, and perhaps that is the question I am throwing to the discussion room, even though I might not be here, how may we theorize the foundation, the drivers, the reasons they're doing the kinds of, theorize how they define themselves in the unequal ecosystem they have to operate in media, and therefore reach the point where they want change and take action towards the change. So colleagues, that's what I invite us to start looking at as scholars of gender and media. The individual women working in media, their sense of the opportunities and even inequalities that they face, and begin to see the impact. Thank you.
Thank you. I think the internet was kind to us. We were losing you at the end. Are you still there, or have you finalized your point? At what point
did you? My goodness.
We lost you.
Oh my God.
Not entirely, but towards the end, when you were talking about how we may theorize the question you're asking. You may wish to.
That's okay. That's okay. So I was saying that my invitation to gender and media scholars looking to the future is begin to ask questions about the drivers of women's interventionist efforts. So women in media, how may we make sense of, how may we theorize, the reasons they come together, the reasons they initiate actions towards correcting the fault lines of gendering in the industry that a lot of research evidence has pointed to.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I know you wanted to use 4 minutes, but I may let you know that you used actually 6. We are happy for the 2 extra minutes.
Forgive.
Since you will not be able to stay to the end, I allowed you to take all the minutes. So we are glad that you have been able to utilize that. Now you said something very interesting about, the interventionist approach, where we think more women in media will necessarily mean significant change. And it reminded me of a time when I was interviewing a very prominent female journalist in Uganda, and she asked me, do you want us to carry women on our back? If they don't want to give us news, if they don't want to speak to journalists, what should we do about it? We can't just carry them on our backs. So there's always the issue of, we need numbers, but what kind of numbers do we actually need? And I think that conversation will be taken in the breakout room, and we can give it some more thought and reflect on it. What are women in the media actually able to do and effectively do? I think for me, that's a very key issue. So it's interesting also you mentioned Ivy, and Ivy, I'll come to you right after this, because you proposed to talk about women using traditional media like radio to gender work in rural areas. Please talk to us. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much for having me, and I'm happy to be here. So when I was asked to give a 4-minute flash talk on an issue in gender and media, I was very, very conflicted because there's a lot to talk about gender and media scholarship that we are missing as a continent. So after working in the Department of Communication Studies for about 3 years as a media educator, and then doing coursework for a PhD for 2 years, I realized that there's a gap in almost all areas of scholarship when we focus our lens on Africa, but particularly in gender and media. So there are 2 theories that are interesting to me that I have noticed in gender and media and have been used in scholarship in the West especially. One is intersectionality and the other is memorializing. So intersectionality was coined by Kimberly Crenshaw, who is a Black feminist scholar in the early 90s, to reveal intersections of power, such as race and class, that go beyond gender, that further oppresses Black women in doing their works or in doing their work on gender. And when we apply this theory to African context, there are other intersections beyond gender that are influenced by culture, but can really work on what African feminists are doing in terms of gender work in African context. But when we look at intersectionality in general, we tend to think that is what is happening in African context really theorized as intersectionality? I don't have an answer to that. The second one is memorializing, and it's simply about historicizing people's work, and when applied to gender, remembering what women have done in terms of gender work and documenting these things for future references for people to have a stepping stone to do gender in media scholarship in Africa. So let me tell you a story and then I'll come to where I think the gaps are. I set out to see how feminist organizing had been done in the past, and particularly how feminists had engaged media in the past. There was very little data on it, especially in Ghana. And I focus on Ghana because that's where I come from. And although there was quite a few on technology, that is on women's access and use, it was mostly on how most women do not have access to technology in Africa, and so are unable to participate fully in the global discourses of organizing. I looked around as I was writing on feminist organizing online and found that they are heavily exclusive. There was a disconnect between what was happening online and offline. Feminists online were very concerned about changing mindsets because their discourses were targeted more to those online who had access to computers, to technology, and who were not necessarily doing feminist grounds work to change the status quo. Now, don't get me wrong, I am not in any way disregarding the work of online feminists because I'm one myself, but I noticed a growing body of literature around feminist organizing online. And I asked myself, how many feminists are online? How many people are online that can participate in these gender works and benefit from the focus of feminist organizing online and these activities? So I turned my focus to local language media and what women on local language media are doing to support women and children, and how these activities can help us theorize the work of feminists in Ghana and, for that matter, countries in Africa who operate a similar model. So I noticed there's very little activity and very little on such scholarship. So I'm giving you a short background to contextualize this. So in the past, there were newspapers that were, they were the only forms of media available. And there were advice columns where people seek redress for their grievances on relationships and family matters on what to be advised for. These spaces were very gendered because the people who were giving the advice were women. And we are not so sure about that, but the names that they were using in these columns connote some gendered, makes us think that they are women, because you find a column that says, talk to Nanaya, or Nanaya advises you. So there were women who were doing these things. And although there were men sending in their grievances, when you look at it like on the face level, it showed that there were more women who were bringing grievances than men. Now, with the introduction of new media, advice columns are taking a multimedia turn, and you can find radio stations running programs that deal with these issues about family and life and in broadcasting. They broadcast in person and online, and audiences are able to engage in these programs. Now, what the contents of these programs tell us about feminist media is that people use radio people use radio to help advance feminist work and to adjudicate issues that are related to women and children. In the first place, can we call these women feminists? What do their use of media tell us about theorizing gender in media work in Ghana and by extension Africa? So although this phenomena has existed and morphed into several things, different things for several years, we still see that scholarship around these are very sparse. And closely tied to this is memorializing. What data do we have around women in film, especially women who are working in local language movies? How are we memorializing them? How are we historicizing what they are doing and making sure that the work that they are doing in terms of local language media are well documented, and who are participating in these scholarships? So my little experience as an educator in Ghana before making the move to get a PhD is that gender and media courses are not mainstream in our communication schools. They are usually something that you can take as a minor, or something that you can take as an elective and not a core course. And there are very few faculty who are trained in gender and media that can support students who work in this area and expand our knowledge and scholarship about these things. So there's a need to focus attention to this area that has probably been neglected in scholarship. So my question to the panel when we go into our breakout rooms is that, how do we ensure that as educators and media scholars, that gender and media scholarship become mainstream in our various departments? Thank you.
Thank you. You have used exactly 5 minutes. Thank you very much for being time conscious. And I like that you actually look deeply into memorializing women's work. And I have done work on women in politics, and sometimes they ask me, but what are these women actually doing? People seem not to remember what they do or to acknowledge what they do. And in many ways, I think I joked about it in the beginning that we are like politicians as academics. We do a lot of work and people rarely see what we do. We are very busy. But if you ask us what we are doing every day, most people will not be able to point out what exactly we do. So I think it's very important that we turn our attention to local language media and how women actually utilize this. And your work, your speech seems to be on the opposite end of what Dr. Joyce is hoping to tell us, that, you know, what are the missing links, how are we utilizing technology, the growing technology that is there. You're focusing more on the existing one that has been there and how we are able to use it. And I mean, for most of us in the continent, we are still largely rural, and we still largely access news and other things via, you know, radio and other means. So that's an important conversation. You're welcome, Dr. Joyce Bazira, to tie into what Ms. Ivy has been talking about. Welcome.
Thank you very much for having me this evening. I will focus on gender and media technology. I'll try to explain an important link, which I think many works in this area have been missing. Going through different literatures, I have observed that many works mainly focus on showing figures and numbers, indicating the growing use of technology in Africa, the impact it's making to individuals and the institutions. Despite availability of many studies in this area, we remain in the dark about a number of key issues. And this provoked me to ask myself a number of questions. For instance, how do women experience these technologies, given society hierarchies that have long structured power relations? How do we mitigate social cultural factors and circumstances that hinder women in Africa from accessing and making a meaningful use of media technology? In order to come up with the meaningful data which will respond to these questions, I argue that there is a need for academic works to move beyond statistics and use a gender perspective to interrogate local factors and circumstances, conditioning women's ability to access and use media technologies. We know that African women experiences cannot be universalized since the context within which this technology. It is a well-known fact that existing power relations in society determines the enjoyment of benefits to technology. It's obvious those with more power over resources, money, knowledge, obvious benefit more. Issues such as the high cost of access to new technologies, low level of women in purchasing digital devices, access to affordable internet data, and the women lower levels of education, which contributes to poor digital skills, put women in Africa at a disadvantage with regard to technology access, use, and benefit. That's why I argue that looking at this from a gender perspective will help in understanding how power dynamics play out in the way women from different countries and communities experience technologies. In our African societies, we know that women are still subjected to traditions and cultural norms which reinforce discrimination and ultimately limiting them to fully benefit from opportunities offered by digital technologies. In order to understand issues like this, which are embedded in society structures and systems, we need studies which will use a gender perspective. We are also informed by a number of works that the exclusion of women in the digital world is widespread in schools and in higher learning institutions, where only a few number of girls join disciplines related to technologies. Studies looking at this problem in a general way cannot help in establishing root causes for this. That's why I'm saying we need to investigate this problem from a gender perspective. I am sure using a gender perspective in understanding media and technology will help in developing meaningful indicators that can contribute to designs and implementation of strategies, policies, laws, which will purposively promote adoption and digital best practices for women in Africa. In conclusion, I would like to say that let us put gender on the agenda in the analysis of how women in Africa benefit from growing media technologies. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you. How do women benefit from growing technologies? And I hope that in the breakout rooms, we will have more discussion around that, and we will be able to discuss the specific ways that women may actually benefit from growing technologies. And talking of how women may benefit, I would like to invite Dr. Winston Mano, who will be talking to us about a more responsive African standpoint for African media. Of course, there's all the talk about technologies being there, women leveraging, the power of technology and so on. Have the cultures actually changed? And what does that mean for African women in particular? You're most welcome, Dr. Mano.
Thank you very much, Emily, and thank you to everyone who is involved.
And may I say that I'm particularly excited that you're part of this panel, because we are always accused of having women speak to women. So
thank you. And normally gender is both men, women, neutrals, and others involved. Yeah. But you're quite right. This is a very important topic, and I'm really privileged and excited to be here, especially talking about women. I think somebody sent me a WhatsApp message the other day saying, "Look, God was so busy that they created a woman to to replace them in some of the roles." Yeah. So women are really important, in our lives. The more everyone is born by a woman. So I'm really humbled to be amongst you, and I agree with most of the facts that my colleagues before have expressed. Intersectionality, we need to look at things in a connected way. But my point today is to try to argue for what I say is an African standpoint or a vantage point. I want to invite people to think more about tackling these things from a decolonial sense. And in it, I would also want to throw in Afroecology. I don't have time. I will try to be quick, but I agree with you that the issue of women, gender inequalities are limiting the potential of us as Africans. The failure to embrace gender diversity has cost a lot of our societies, countries, communities, even universities. They can't operate at full potential because they are not embracing fully the roles of women. If we close the gender gaps, it can actually provide much more impetus to the development, democratization, and other things that we need. The question is, why has it continued to be like this? Some people mentioned uneven access to education. That's correct. Normally when the resources are low, the people say, oh, the girl child can just stay at home, the boy child can go, which is really wrong. Yeah? Lack of employment equality. We know even here in Britain, the pay gap between men and women doing the same job. We may be professors, we may be getting differently. If you are Black and you're a woman, it's a double kind of discrimination that you normally get. So job segregation, lack of legal protections and things like that, poor medical cares, lack of religious freedom, like even when people go to pray as Muslims or Christians, sometimes it's not enough freedoms and capacity afforded to women. Then there's outright racism and other things. So what is the necessary corrective here? In my view, when you look at the current arguments, apart from intersectionality, I want to throw in the argument of decoloniality. It actually points to the issue of power relations, which Joy talked about at the beginning, whereby we look at our societies as also constrained by coloniality of power, coloniality of knowledge, and coloniality of being. And most of these, they weigh in heavily on women because they are already in paternalistic societies that do not afford more rights to women. Coloniality survived, never mind the lowering of flags. We are saying coloniality survived colonialism. It's part of the air that we breathe. Yeah? So the necessary corrective is disruptive kind of interventions. And we, for example, I'm in the camp of decoloniality. We very much draw from feminism and women's movements. And the whole idea is that decoloniality is about re-existence. It's about redefining and re-signifying the life of dignity for those who are marginalized. The point is, and I will discuss this in the room, when you are asking what should we decolonize, if decoloniality is the necessary thing, normally people talk about knowledges, talk about representations, but what is needed are actually the structures, the institutions and practice. We need to decolonize beyond just knowledge. Yeah? Otherwise, we end up recentering the kind of categoric knowledge that we are saying. Then also in terms of decoloniality, we should also rediscover and find resources within where our lived experience. We should extract from our own local, context. And we should also name the oppression that is letting us down. We should reflect deeply on our own position. Sometimes we become the educated women when we forget a lot of the other women out there. So it's very important to do that. Then we should also unlearn our privilege and we should understand the communities that we research. So most of this is actually common to you. But what we have done with my colleague Viola Milton, she's a professor at University of South Africa, is to think deeply about reflecting from our own lived experience and foreground the notion of Afroecology, which emphasizes the idea that nobody has complete knowledge. Yeah? Nobody has it all together. Knowledge exists in a state of incompleteness. We should always reach out and add more by incorporating other perspectives. We also put in the notion of relational accountability into this decolonial heuristic tool called Afroecology, making it more collaborative, convivial, and transdisciplinary. I know I don't have time, but I will put in the chat the Afroecological transdisciplinary toolkit that we came up with, which in terms of methodology, theory, and other things, it really gives an African vantage point. For example, in terms of Afroecology, the reasons for doing research or work about women's issues will be to undo the misrepresentation and the historical marginalization of African women, their thoughts, their knowledge, and their aesthetics. And when you look at the epistemological grounds for doing this, it is to try and grasp this knowledge, which is political, which is relational, but to also amplify freedom and promote social justice. When you look at the methodologies that are applicable to develop this vantage point, the African standpoint, you realize that the methodology of the oppressed, which is not driven by particular method, but rather by questions that emerge from the larger social context. It believes that relational and comparative approaches may provide answers to problems previously outside the scope of the field. So it refutes completeness, like, if people say, well, we have it all sorted, they are not being honest. Knowledge exists in a state of becoming, it's iterative. So this centering of an African episteme or African standpoint is one that should take a draw from our lived experience. It should be one that enriches rather than projects mediocrity. It is something that can provide understanding of previously silenced knowledges. So as women, we can think of how we can develop common vocabulary, engage with knowledge based on our experiences, exploring the local and global implications, establishing the methodology of the oppressed, as I said, including speaking to, against, and through power, and taking seriously oppositional consciousness, and including, perspectives from Africa, from the diaspora. A standpoint needs to be much more nuanced, yeah? And people from Africa on the continent and people in the diaspora, they have much in common. Sometimes there are some divisions that are put there by history, which we want to do away with. And also, what I will say, I know my time is running out, is to develop an ethics of relational accountability, which is based on respectful representation, reciprocity, and rights of the researched. We should revisit some of the big arguments within our fields, yeah, whether it's media studies or sociology, trying to tackle these things from an African point of view, from a vantage point of view, based on our lived experience, so that we can begin to reread in ways that are more meaningful. At the moment, sometimes we have people like Nyamjo, my colleague, anthropologist, he talks about mimicry. We want to go beyond that. We want to start to grasp things and then to express them in ways that would make more sense to us from an African point of view. I will stop there for now. Thank you.
Sorry, I didn't realize that I'm muted, but thank you very much, Dr. Mano. And I particularly like the issue of, decolonizing structures and institutions. And most times people point out and say, there are more women now leading newsrooms, there are more female managers, there are more whatever. And we never really stop to recognize that these women are operating within the patriarchal structures that have always existed, that the men have always used. And it's very difficult for them to work outside of those structures unless those structures and institutions actually change. There's very little, even as a woman with all the passion. And I think one of the speakers was talking about, conscious women, but there's very little you can do even as a conscious woman within a structural setup, within an institution that is set up patriarchally. And I mean, my area of specialty is talk shows, political talk shows and stuff. And it's hard to find women in those areas because, again, the structures, the systems, just were set up for men in many ways. So I think that's an interesting conversation. My job is to moderate, not to say anything.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So I'm glad, and I think that very nicely ushers us into the discussion that Professor Chibita wishes to have, and which is really to more broadly look at gender, media and gender scholarship, and issues around gender-sensitive media content, content in curricula, and as well as media literacy, but also more especially the supervision capacity. Do we even have the capacity to supervise media and gender research? I mean, how many people have actually done that kind of thing? So if you are stranded with a number of people who wish to study media and gender, would you as faculty actually have the capacity to supervise them? Professor Chibita, you're most welcome.
Thank you very much. And hello, Winston. Hello, everyone else. I'm really happy to be here. I will turn my camera off for reasons Emily knows. I just wanted you to know that it's not a ghost speaking, but now I'll turn my camera off.
Okay. Thank you, Prof. Yeah.
First of all, it's really cruel to have everybody speak about everything and then have the moderator summarize what I am going to speak about and then be asked to speak. But I'm going to try to say something sensible anyway. So I guess my idea came from the fact that a lot of the scholarship on media that we have is about portrayal of women in the media in terms of advertising or news and so on. It's also about numbers, how many are working in the newsrooms and so on and so forth. It's about positions that they occupy, and it's about their use of media, either for political participation or for development-related things like health and so on. There isn't too much scholarship on scholarship. There really isn't too much on that. So we know that there are some women out there in media scholarship in Africa, but I haven't seen too many studies that comprehensively address the element of scholarship itself. Who is out there? What are they studying? And so on and so forth. And I thought that perhaps to focus my presentation a little bit, a 3-minute, 5-minute presentation, I would look at the three, they call it the tripartite mandate of academic institutions. Yeah, so that mandate has to do with teaching, it has to do with research, and it has to do with community engagement. And I'll take those one by one and speak very briefly about what my concerns are, what gaps I see. First of all, on teaching, I think Emily alluded to this a little bit. I think that there are gaps in terms of who is teaching media, where are they teaching media, what are their qualifications, are they qualified to teach media at university, what languages are they teaching in, what courses do they teach, and I'll come back to this. Do they teach gender courses or gender-related courses? Are these courses taught by women, or are they actually taken over and taught by men sometimes? And does that make a difference? What are their experiences teaching in a largely gendered environment? So those are some areas that I think there are gaps there and opportunities we could seize for scholarship. The other area that I would want to look at is the area of curriculum. I think the word I would use is tokenism. A lot of times you will be asked whether you have gender on your curriculum and you say yes. And what you mean is that you have a course or two courses that say gender and politics, or gender and the environment, and so on. And apart from mentioning gender in the title of the course, sometimes there isn't that much of depth in there. The people don't live there being capable of analyzing gender in the environment or gender in politics or anything. They just know that men and women are treated unequally in these areas. Maybe I'm trivializing a little bit, but I think that we have a lot of tokenism around discussions of curricula around gender and the media. And we also maybe need to look into priorities. What priorities inform curricula in media, and does gender feature in these priorities? What about the processes of inclusion of gender issues or gender generally in the curricula? What about mainstreaming? Is there any discussion of mainstreaming gender so that it's not just an isolated course? What about the power dynamics inherent in curriculum development and implementation? Those are some areas that I thought, maybe there are a few gaps there, maybe I'm ill-informed. The other area, of course, is the area of enrollment. How do female students get enrolled into media courses? Do they come in this as their first choice? Do they come to it because they have failed to get into other courses like law, as happens a lot in our institution? How many of them? What about access? How level is the ground for them to access these courses? What about the courage to join in terms of stereotyping? You know, you're going into the media. Are you a man? Are you going to behave like a man? Will you be able to survive? What about the bullets and the tear gas and so on if you work in my part of the country and so on? How ground is the level? Is there any affirmative action for women to access the media? Of course, then I'll talk about the area of mentorship, which I will tie up very closely with supervision. I think for us to develop a cadre of women who will conduct gender-sensitive research in the media, mentorship is key. And we need to look into what mentorship programs are there. I have looked at mentorship programs at a number of African universities, and most of them are in the STEM subjects. I haven't seen too many. There are a few mentorship programs that are linked to the industry rather than to the academy. But I haven't seen too many academic institutions in our region that have mentorship programs to strengthen scholarship in media. And tied to this also is supervision. Not having conducted an empirical study, I can't say with authority, but I want to say that the ratio of male to female supervisors is not exactly tilted in the direction of female supervisors in our field. So the likelihood that you will get a female supervisor or a gender-sensitive, gender-aware male supervisor is not too high. I'll go to the very last one as I finish, and that is community engagement. The other mandate of universities is community engagement. And the question we must ask is at what level are women involved when we engage with communities, especially when we engage with communities on matters media? Do we just bring them on board because they are good actresses in skits? I see that happening very often, skits and local dramas. Or do we actually allow them to participate or give them opportunities to participate at the highest level in the media, in the talk shows that Emilly was talking about? What efforts have there been to level the ground for them, for their participation to be more than just token or more than just basic? In areas of education, for example, in areas of language, in areas of technology, in areas of culture and what women may or may not do, but also in terms of them being able to take the time off. How likely is it that a woman will be allowed to take a week off to study media literacy, for example? Then how sensitive are our media literacy programs to the inherent inequalities in communities that silence women's voices? How does culture, technology, language, etc. feature in here? I'll just, as I end, and this time I'm really ending, is the opportunities. Opportunities are in all the questions that I've asked, but I think broadly, we need to look into the area of mentorship and supervision so that we can organically produce people who care about the place of gender in media scholarship. I think that would be one thing. The other thing is we need to look into the supportive environments for doing this kind of research in academia. And then the third thing is raising the visibility of gender in the African academy in terms of policies, spaces, roles, etc., and raising the visibility of media as a legitimate area of academic research for women. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Chibita. So I did not summarize your thoughts after all. You have been able to ask so many questions, and I think that finding answers to some of these many questions are themselves areas of scholarship, media scholarship. And unfortunately, we will not be having Professor Margaret Jjuuko. I know that she had intended to speak to issues around implementation of gender media policies in the newsroom, and the fact that there are many gender policies around, even in the newsroom, but the point is that a few of them ever get implemented. So we will go into our breakout rooms. I'll read a number of questions, and in the breakout rooms, I think we can tease out a little more in terms of what opportunities actually exist in these areas. And I mean, the gaps have come out very clearly in the discussion we have just had. And for us to now go into the breakout room and, around these issues, actually be able to discuss the specific opportunities that are there and how we can utilize them. I think the questions revolve around factors or conditions affecting women's ability to access and use media technology, and to somehow recommend strategies to address them. Because much as technology is there, we do know, as the speaker told us, that a few women may have access to those as well. That's a key gap. Then the second question we may wish to look at is what can we as gender and media scholars do to ensure that gender and media scholarship is mainstream in our various departments. I think it's one thing to have them in the curriculum, as the Professor Chibita was saying, but it's another to have it streamlined or mainstreamed in the various activities in supervision, mentorship, and other things. Then the third question is what will it take for gender to be mainstreamed in university level curricula and research in the region? And I think the first two, the question before this and this one, Joy, please pay attention, may have to be discussed in the same group so that it ties out very well and they can tease them out very quickly. And then the last question is how can we decolonize structures and institutions to advance women issues, and why can and how can we make it work better? So these are the questions. We will have 4 questions and 2 per group. We're about 22, and we will be able to go into 2 groups of 11 each, and then have a meaningful discussion of about 30 minutes, devoting 15 minutes to each question. And I know that 15 minutes will run out very quickly, but I think that we will need to return to the plenary to have a brief of what happened in our various groups. So Joy, can the technical person lead us in that direction?
Okay, so you'll be getting a notification now to join your groups, and I'll join the groups and paste the questions in your chat box shortly. So I'm opening the rooms right now. Okay, so please join your groups. Okay. Okay. Yes, just click the link coming up. on your screen to join your breakout room.
Rose, would you like to join any group? Hello? Emilly?
Welcome back, everyone. All right, sorry about that. So welcome back, everyone. So I'll be handing back over to Dr. Emilly.
Thank you, Joy. Thank you, Joy. Everyone, thank you so much for the discussion you've had in your groups. I think we ended up having a really nice conversation. And so it will be interesting to hear from those who were in the other room, as they might also find hearing from us interesting. So what we will do is to have a brief report from each group. We had only 2 breakout rooms, and I don't know whether we call them. So if you were not in my room, you were in room 2. Because I want to assume that I think I was in room 1. So let's start by hearing from room 2, and then we will come to room 1. They say the last shall be first sometimes. Room 2.
All right.
You have 2 minutes to report.
All right. So we were looking at the first question we looked at was how we can mainstream gender into media studies. And some of the things that we agreed to was that there has to be a more conscious discussion on the subject, not just make gender a part of a module or something that is talked about in a week, but there has to be a conscious effort to discuss it as part of the programs that we run. And in connection with that, we said that we need to incorporate it into the courses that we teach. So no matter the course that you teach, there has to be some angle of gender in there to raise awareness on the importance of gender issues when it comes to media and communication studies. Then there was a suggestion that it really needs to start from the undergraduate level. However, we've also found out that the story is different in Zimbabwe. So there's a women's university in Zimbabwe that has a gender program at the undergraduate level. However, as it goes up, there is nothing like that. So we have to relook at how the training is done generally, so that it starts from the undergraduate before it goes to the master's and the PhD levels. Then we also said that there's the need for academic collaboration with other faculties to ensure that they help in the training when it comes to gender and media studies. Then on the second question, we're looking at how we can decolonize. And our thoughts are that it's important that we realign structures and rethink issues so that we can question why women are not able to rise to the levels that we need to rise to when it comes to media scholarship. Again, we suggested that it's important that a lot more women are cited when we are working as academics. So we need to be deliberate about finding out what other women are writing and cite them. Then we have to create an enabling environment for women to take up roles and put together policies that favor women. Again, we said that it's important to create alliances with people in authority, create alliances with men to be able to help in that decolonization process. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Was that one question? Did you have another? Did you have another question?
Yes, I tackled the second question. Yes, the second question was on decolonizing the structures for,
okay.
Yes.
Oh, I thought that was part of how to how to mainstream gender in our institution.
I think that it fits
would
into
as well
it.
work.
I think it fits into it. So
yeah. Okay, that's beautiful. Thank you, Paulina. I think that does anybody from this group want to add anything? Anything Paulina has left out in your discussion? Or anything that just struck you as she was speaking? Okay, so we will come to group one then. Ivy, are you reporting or?
Ivy? You took the notes, so you do the report.
Okay, I can report, no worries. So group one, we had 2 questions and one was around strategies for ensuring women have access to technologies and utilize them well. And one of the things that we thought was important is addressing attitudes of people towards technology. And we thought that digital literacy is a big thing, and women need to be educated or maybe supported to use technology and empowered in many other ways, or at least given the knowledge on what technology can afford them. And in most cases, we have discussed underrepresentation in light of gatekeeping practices of media houses, and yet technology would allow them to bypass some of those gatekeeping practices, and why are they still not using them? So that's very, very key, addressing attitudes. But also we thought that dealing with the cost of technology is very key. It might be that newsrooms or faculties actually have to empower women by giving them basic technology to utilize, because the cost of technology in our part of the world can be very, very high. And in most cases, there is also a gender pay gap. The men get paid better anyway. So we can have affirmative action by way of providing women with technologies, even if it's a laptop to do research and have them keep it or something like that. I think that would be important. Then the third one is prioritizing women when giving out technologies, and that is within the newsrooms. It has to be a matter of prioritizing. Then 4, empowering technology users to be more ethical. The issues around cyberbullying discourage more women from using technologies and generally get women to stay away from technologies. So if we address issues of cyberbullying by way of being more ethical or even legal means, I think that would encourage more women to utilize technology. And the last one is around training journalists, female journalists, on issues of safety and security. So if they're more aware of how to be safe and use technology more securely, that will address part of the problem. So those were the things that we took away. There were other issues, but the main ones are those. Then the second question we discussed was very similar to yours. It had to do with mainstreaming gender in our departments, faculties, and systems generally. And one of the key things that came up was the matter of policy, that perhaps we might need to have fair and supportive policy at the level of the university without having gender mainstreaming policies within the universities, especially where we are talking about scholarship. Then we might not be able to get much. So that's key. The second thing, of course, is how those policies can permeate structures and institutions and make sure that real changes actually happen at that level. That's 3. Then 3, being intentional about making gender part of our curriculum. Not just at the MA master's level, but also including gender issues in our undergraduate curriculum. But something more interesting also came up, that perhaps as we teach courses like research methods, which is at the heart of this media scholarship, we may want to at least include areas of gender. How do we make research gendered? Because people have concerns that because they did not have they did not have a grounding in gender at undergraduate level, how do you then start doing research that is gendered at that level? So having a gender, even if it is to train faculty every now and then on gender, it's going to make a difference. Then the other thing we talked about is mentorship, having more female mentors and having mentorship embedded within the academic institutions would be very key. We also talked about employing female faculty, being intentional about recruiting female faculty, and where you have 8 to 2, you can be intentional about recruiting at least 3 other women to ensure that you have 8 to 5 ratio. Then building research supervision capabilities, and I think that was a concern. How we do that would be by training, giving people opportunities for retooling, whatever else we can do to make sure that the capacity of people to supervise research that also is gendered is very, very key. But there was also a proposal that maybe as students do their projects and dissertations, we require that they have a gender angle in their thinking. They should at least be seen to be gender sensitive. I don't know how far we will go with that, but it's a good proposal as well. Then lastly, that we could also form research teams around subjects that relate to gender, maybe media and gender and social justice, gender and whatever, so that there are research teams within the university whose specialty is actually gender and media, and they can win grants around those subjects and they can do much in that area. I think I have said everything that my group talked about. If I've left anything, group members, rescue me. Group members, please rescue me.
I think you did a great job.
Okay, so at this point, I think we are running out of time. I will give each of the panel members 3 minutes to have concluding thoughts. They have had our discussions, they have had the things of concern, they have had each other speak, and I think that it's now crucial for them to give us their parting shots, and to do that in 3 minutes. That's not a lot. There are 5 that will take us about 15 minutes. And we will be able to wrap up just in time. May I start with, I'll start with the person who spoke last, Professor Chibita. You were the last when we spoke first, so you start.
Well, it's been a really, I'm in a noisy place. It's been a really enriching discussion. And I was kind of impressed by the agreement in the initial presentations of the panel, because it seemed like we were all basically looking at the same animal from different corners and all the bases were covered. I am very passionate about the idea, one, of mentorship and the research supervision, because that kind of speaks to sustainable results in my opinion. So I think that is something that would really be important. And the idea of mainstreaming gender in curriculum and in especially research methodology courses, I think would go a long way in addressing scholarship gaps. I really liked Winston's take on decolonizing gender scholarship, and there were lots of takeaways there. There's also somebody who spoke about language, the role of local language media. That is an old sweetheart of mine, and I was very happy to hear that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor, for your own takeaways from this discussion. I must agree with you that this has been a very rich discussion, and it's a shame that not very many people were able to join in, because this is really, really an important area of discussion. But I can understand the timing of this session for Ugandans. They must all be running out of wherever they are to go home in traffic and so on. But it's been a rich discussion. So I agree with you in terms of sustainability. If we are looking at sustainability, then mentorship, research supervision, and mainstreaming curriculum is very, very key. With that, I'll move to Professor Winston Mano. I'm going in reverse order. Yeah. Please unmute yourself. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It has been a very rich discussion and eye-opener to many things. I learned so much. And I would like to say from a decolonial point of view, it's not a destination. The struggle is real, it's continuous. We get frustrations, but we should maintain what they call critical hope, that things are getting changed and will change, yeah? And we should demand changes that are important. I quite like, the focus on technologies, which are really, after COVID, technologies have made the issue of, our normal life quite different, yeah. And also some affordances have come where women, for example, can work from home and can overcome some of the barriers that are usual. But however, it also has meant that, women are doing double job, in the home and somewhere else. So it has created some new challenges. So technologies, they also amplify some of the existing power, differences. So we should also be alert to some of these dynamics, the current atmosphere, and how COVID is making other areas, much more, productive, but also bringing some added kind of challenges. Yeah. And I also like, the points that were made by my fellow panelists, and would like to urge people to make these alliances. They are really important. Yeah. We should not, I think, create silos where women's issues are just addressed by women, or men's issues, men are left to address their own issues. We should think of the relationships between these categories. And you're quite right, that we need to create a bigger dialogue, a greater dialogue, to create more momentum. Alliances are really important to unlock potential and to create added impact in what we are trying to do. The issue of mentorship, I quite like it from my Professor Chibita. And this in practice means sometimes, like what Paulina said, we need to be deliberate in thinking about how to include women. So if, for example, they are equally qualified candidates, yeah, and you say, oh, who should I take? If the decision is yours, yeah, whether you are Susan, who is working for a big corporate in Zimbabwe, you have to be deliberate and choose a woman for that managerial role, or for that, PhD scholarship. And I think the more we do this, the more we can decolonize structures and create real opportunities that are tangible. We should also push those with power and create alliances. If there are women parliamentarians or men who are sympathetic to these issues, should take advantage of this so that they can help to center the voices of women in ways that can produce tangible change. And we should also amplify if there are role models and people who are doing well, even reporting them. I like my friend Susan here. She has really studied women's issues, but she has also pushed things in academia, but also in industry. She has been CEO of Zimbabwe's Broadcasting Corporation, and she has done a lot of other things. Yeah. So to have people like that and pushing for at a women's university for greater education, I think it's very important. And we should write about this and have case studies. People like Professor Monica Jubita, Emilly we should, not celebrate you, but make sure that those who are coming behind, those young girls, they can look up to you and say, yes, I can do it. Yeah. So there's a way we should amplify and showcase the models in ways that can empower and give voice to those who are coming below. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. You have spoken so well. I don't want to add anything to that. I think that we need more of you to be in the space of the dialogue, the big conversations from time to time, and write about these things. I think there's always a tendency to think when women are writing about these things, they're writing from an angry point of view, and it's easy to label them. But if we hear more men actually speaking to these issues, why they're important, what needs to be done, and how it can be done, I think we will see change. And I think change is there. It's still little. We don't talk much about it, but we're seeing it. I think the last group of students I taught in my gender and media class really warmed my heart. I saw those girls discuss issues that I never thought about, and as an undergraduate student, and I felt really gratified. And so I think there's more. Just having the course on the curriculum is enough to open up, avenues for discussion, which is very interesting. Thank you. And so I come to the next person, Dr. Joyce Bazira. I also quite like the take on technology. So please come give your concluding remarks, 3 minutes. Do we still have Dr. Joyce Bazira? Okay, I think she might not be on. In that case, we can go to Ivy, your concluding remarks, please. And I think that will be the last because Dr. Abena has already gone, and I will give the final remark. Thank you, Ivy.
The last word, I'm going to make it very short and sweet. So it's been a very enriching conversation for me and to be in this space with equally very good scholars. I'm passionate about rethinking our departments and making sure that even if we do not have the tools to mainstream gender in our curriculum immediately, we start from allowing our students to borrow classes from other departments that have gender studies or that are primarily set up to do things around gender. And that's what helps us to diversify our content. And the last thing I'm going to say is that although technologies are equally very important, we should dedicate some time to studying women in traditional media as well and explore ways that their work can help us theorize gender and media scholarship. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I don't know if there is anybody among participants. I'm very democratic. If there's anybody among participants who wishes to give a concluding word to represent those who were not panelists. Please put your hand up if there is anyone. Okay, I don't see anyone. So we have just 3 minutes to stop, and I want to remind us that we have a closing session. There's a closing session for the 3 days we have been here, and it will be interesting to go and hear what the last 3 days have been like and how they are coming to an end. For me, this has been very, very interesting because I like to be on the other side, just hearing other people speak and taking notes the way I have. I have written so many things. I might be studying after here. So I want to thank each one of you for your time, for taking the time to come and speak to us. I want to thank Professor Mano for taking the time to be with us. I want to thank Joyce, even though she has already gone. I want to thank also Ivy, University of Oregon. Thank you very much for making it. And I will thank Dr. Abena, who has also gone. Finally, last but not least, Professor Chibita, who has also been with us, especially knowing the challenges she's had today. I'm really thankful that she stayed with us throughout the session. And I hope that this will not be the end of the conversation, that somehow we will have a never-ending stream of activities that ensure that we have these conversations, because it's easy to put them in our back burner and not to really discuss them. And yet sometimes even just discussing them is doing something about them. Even just recognizing that we have succeeded on some levels gives us the juice that we need to move to the next action. And I think, as Professor Mano said, the struggle is real. I think we have a saying in Uganda that the struggle is real, that we are in the struggle. And I think issues of gender are pretty much about struggle, that and it need not be. I think I look forward to that time when issues around gender will not be an issue of struggle, when we all recognize that it's important to treat each other well, to give each other opportunities, and to get to the next level on merit when we deserve it, and so on. So I'm really glad that we have been able to have this conversation, and I'm looking forward to the next one. I want to thank the organizers for putting this panel together. This has been a truly, truly rich panel. And I had wondered about the number and thought, oh my goodness, how are we going to do this? The number seemed so high, but it has